Wes, we're skipping the cold open today. The glasses just came off. The Denver Nuggets have fired Mike Malone, and they're basically firing Calvin Booth as well, even though they're not calling it a firing, but they're not keeping Calvin Booth. And the playoffs start in a week. We're going to just talk all about that on today's Just Basketball show. Let's go. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Just Basketball Show. We just did one episode last week. We're back to two this week. I took a little trip to Seattle, Washington, so my apologies. But, Wes, I got to tell you, kind of worked out. We to break the fourth wall for a second, originally our plan was to record Monday. Mm-hmm. I, on my end, did not communicate very well, and then I was out and about. You had a game to cover. Kind of would have been pretty pissed if we had recorded yesterday and then, Michael Malone gets fired today, and we were like, well, I don't know what we're doing here. I kind of worked out. The universe did us a solid, I think, here.
Yeah, thank you to the Denver Nuggets for waiting to fire Michael Malone one more day and decide that you're going to part ways with Calvin Booth for one more day so that we could talk about it here.
Yes. But, Wes, we are powered by our friends at BetMGM.
That's right. And if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code JUSTBASKETBALL and you'll get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android. Sign up using the code JUSTBASKETBALL. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use the bonus code JUSTBASKETBALL when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, Wes, let's dive into this. The Denver Nuggets at 47-32, fourth in the West, but obviously a very congested West where there's scenarios where they end up in the play-in, which I think would obviously be a huge disappointment for them. And again, 3 games to go in the regular season. The playoffs start. We're going to sleep a couple. We're going to blink and the playoffs are going to be here. Michael Malone is fired. General manager Calvin Booth, who really orchestrated this roster, fired. David Adelman, according to the team, who's long been a head coaching candidate, son of Rick Adelman, is going to take over as interim coach. No one else got fired, according to at least a story I read in The Athletic. And the quote from Josh Kroenke, who vice chairman of the Kroenke Sports Group that owns the team, quote, "We're trending towards a direction that I thought would probably be very near to our season in the near future. All that taken into consideration, we wanted to find a way to potentially squeeze as much juice out of the rest of the season as possible." And Wes, while I understand that, much like Taylor Jenkins, but somehow even more so, I just don't quite understand the timing on this. I feel like, again, we're missing some information here on really what is driving this. We'll get into the reasons, I think, and sort of maybe what that leads me to think and what you think about that once we get a little deeper into the show. But I just don't get doing this with 3 games to go, frankly. Yes, the Nuggets are trending the right direction, but frankly, a new David Adelman and a different general manager is not going to change anything. That Jamal Murray's hamstring being bum and his situation being a real concern for them. If he's unhealthy, none of this matters anyway. I don't know why this needed to be done right now based on the facts we have in front of us.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It almost is like college sports and college football where one coach from a big program gets fired and then all of the other programs that are thinking about firing their coach start firing their coach just so that the other coaches that are going to be out there, the top coaching candidates, know, oh, that job is available. I'm not going to rush into anything before I at least take a meeting with Ohio State or whatever the program is. I don't know if that's what's going on here, but it just feels like that's sort of the timing of things that are happening. What's weird is that Memphis and Denver are both teams that are going to be in the playoffs here, and now they're going to be doing it with interim coaches. Now, in Denver, Adelman is highly respected across the league. He's been part of coaching searches before. He could very well hold on to this job, right? Now, I don't think that that's what they'll do. The Kroenkes tend to go with experienced coaches. Michael Malone was a head coach in Sacramento who was fired from the Kings before he took the job in Denver. And that tends to be the way that they go. But you never know. And, I know that in the statement it said this is all about trying to maximize their chances for winning in 2025. And, okay, I get it. That feels like one of those things that you just have to say. But what this really felt like to me was it was an open secret that Calvin Booth and Michael Malone did not get along.
Yes.
For a couple of years now.
I mean, I think even if you weren't reading like the stories about this from like Michael Singer or something, and I apologize for cutting you off, it was even just like Michael Malone not playing the guys that Calvin Booth was drafting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that tells you kind of everything about the disconnect.
Well, and then Calvin Booth deciding, well, I'm not going to give you any vets last year, so you have to play some of the young guys. And then Michael Malone doing whatever he could not to.
And then
again this year.
Pays Zeke Naji for 4 years and doesn't. Zeke Naji's out of the rotation, brings in Darius Arch. He's out of the rotation.
Or even look recently, I mean, playing Russell Westbrook at the end of some of these losses over somebody like Pickett, who was playing well and doesn't have some of the floor spacing issues that Russell Westbrook presents, but Michael Malone wants to go with the vets. Calvin Booth wanted to go with the young guys. There's a bunch of stuff just with that in and of itself that we can get into here. But in terms of the timing of it, it just felt like Kroenke was the dad in front of the car threatening to turn the car around over and over and over again.
Yes.
Because Michael Malone and Calvin Booth never got along. There were factions within the Nuggets organization. This felt like it was spilling over into everything. And eventually Kroenke just turned around and said, you know what? I'm going to turn the car around and both of you get out of the car. And I'm going to go without you. And that's just what it felt like.
This also a little bit feels to me, it's interesting, Wes, because like the analogy when I was prepping for the show on one of my last flight today, a little jaunt from Detroit to Cleveland, and so like not a long flight, so I'm just like jotting through my thoughts, trying to get just kind of sort this out of my head, and like the best analogy I could find was really like a soccer analogy. In that, like, sometimes, like in European football, when there's relegation, teams will like fire a manager, even if the manager is like really not the problem. It's like the players are the problem ultimately before the manager. Right. They just like fire the manager to have a new voice in the room and like stave off being relegated and thus losing a bunch of money. That kind of feels like this to me. It's like we're just trying to like limit the bleeding as much as we can this year, and like. We know there's we know there's a reset coming. I think there's a lot of questions here about what alignment. It feels like alignment in this organization is going to have to be priority number one in a lot of ways. I think here and whatever is going to come next year. It wouldn't shock me, frankly, if like Adelman's the coach, but then like if you hire a new executive, are they going to want to like bring in their own guy? Like there's all these like questions sort of this, but this feels like this is like trying to just stop the bleeding and say like, hey guys, we're keeping a coach you like. Let's hope Jamal gets healthy. We have the best player in the world who might win MVP.
Yeah.
Let's just like I think there's truth in that squeezing statement, but it's like it just feels like a panicked move to some degree, which is interesting for a team that hasn't really made like reactionary moves in the Nikola Jokic era.
Yeah, and I think the Kroenkes deserve some blame here too, even though they're blaming Calvin Booth and Michael Malone because they didn't want to spend the maximum amount of money that they could have spent on this team, right? And this is not even this is not necessarily even like you should have kept Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Bruce Brown or whatever these guys, even though the Bruce Brown thing was harder for them to do because of some of the restrictions. But just in general, like they never really spent as much. And so you're right, Chris. This is whatever they decided that they would be willing to spend. It's way easier to fire your coach. It's cheaper to fire your coach than it is to just spend more money on a team and then get into that second luxury tax apron and do all of those things. But they have not spent as much as they could on the roster, and this is their way of trying to shake things up. And, defensively, they're not where they need to be. And you're already hearing reports that maybe Michael Malone lost the locker room in terms of, hey, we want to play like this defensively. You don't have to read the reports. Just listen to the quotes at the end of these games where the players would say, we know what we need to be doing. We're just not doing it. Or Michael Malone saying, like, I'm out of answers and I've done everything I could. Maybe it is as simple as 10 years in, we needed a new voice. I just have a hard time also coming to that conclusion because they won a championship less than 2 years ago. But I think that there's a lot of places to blame and a lot of sources to blame for where it is the Nuggets are. And like Nuggets fans, we're fourth in the Western Conference. Why we the difference between fourth and eighth in the West is not that big. And you just watch these Nuggets games, and they're clearly not they're not where they need to be. They don't look or play like a championship contender right now. So the frustrations, I think, are valid. But I think there's a lot of sources for blame for how we got here there. And two of those people involved don't have a job with the Denver Nuggets anymore.
22nd in defense right now, according to Cleaning the Glass. That is not championship caliber.
Nope.
That's not an indicator that this is like an actual contender. And like every other team, the Clippers, the Wolves, like all these other teams, the Lakers, they're all trajecting in a different way. The Nuggets are trajecting this way, and that's again despite having, I think, the best player in the world, which I don't think can be overlooked here. It's not exactly. It actually kind of reminds me somewhat of the Buck stuff, Wes, where they just like fire Darvin Ham and just hit a jack. Because like we have Giannis, like we kind of have to just maybe do this stuff. This is obviously a little bit different because it wasn't a new coach. This is a guy that has been Jokic's only head coach in his career up until this point.
Yeah.
And Jamal Murray's, and you let that guy go. That's notable in the change of direction. More shocking to you, before we get into the exact reasons that we've seen at least reported from what I've read, and maybe you've read some stories I've missed, but more shocking to you, Jenkins or Malone being fired?
Malone.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Jenkins thing was just the writing was on the wall, and that's not to say that the Michael Malone stuff wasn't out there, because that's been out there for, again, 2 years now. But just surprising that they would do it now, right? Like, we were shocked when Jenkins got fired with 9 games left in the season, and then all of a sudden the Nuggets were like, hold my cores. And they did it with 4 games left in the regular season. So that, I think that's what the most surprising thing is. Didn't he earn a little bit more respect than that? I don't know, but
at least till through the playoffs or something like that. To me, feels like you could.
And the thing is, he's a proven playoff tactician.
Yes.
And we don't know anything about Adelman, so maybe he's awesome. We don't know that, but we did know that with Michael Malone. So I was a little surprised that you didn't just at least give him to the end of the year.
All right, the reported reasons this is from the Athletic story from Sam Amick, Tony Jones, and Zach Powell. Malone and Booth had been odds over everything from, quote, roster construction to the way players were used, quote, creating tension that started to bleed into the rest of the organization, which we've discussed. Another issue here is that is the defense, which we've touched on, and Jokic apparently has been at his, quote, wit's end when it came to the team's performance on the defensive end of the floor. I think, to me, the thing that strikes me as like most deserving of firing for both Booth and Malone, because I think there's culpability on both ends there. It is the tension that bleeds into other aspects of your day-to-day business. Mm-hmm. The NBA is not analogous exactly to like an office job that people may have, or like if you're working in any kind of team setting. These things there's more money at stake. There is pressure. It is shorter windows. They are like very intense and very competitive by their very nature. They don't ever last as long as, like, you don't have a 40-year career with one team in the league. I think there are, like, frankly, 3 coaches in the league that I would say, like, I would be absolutely flabbergasted. If I fired everyone else, would be like, something goes wrong, I could see them getting fired. It's Spo, it's Ty Lue, and it's Steve Kerr. Like, I think those guys, as long as they want those jobs, probably can have those jobs. Everyone else, you're, like, one weird year away from getting the act. I think it's just the reality of the league and of sports, frankly. But the organizations that win, that have success, I think the Nuggets in 2013 are like a really good example of this. You have alignment. You're on the same page. You're all moving in the same direction, and like it has to work in that way. When that stops happening, and it's not like this, again, this is not like this is new. They probably knew this was a thing going on at the start of the season, over the offseason last year. I think that is enough reason to like reset this. I do. It feels to me, if they haven't fired other front office people yet, I probably think that's probably where this goes. That you're getting a full restaffing to some degree of the front office. I have a name I'll pitch you later. I think it's the obvious big name kind of out there that I think I would be my first call if I'm on the Kroenkes. But I think when you lose that alignment, that is, and the coach is at fault, that the GM's at fault for that. To me, I think that's enough reason to say, like, okay, maybe we do need to blow this up. The timing is questionable, but I think that reason, because it bleeds into the on-court product and what you're actually producing, I think that is enough reason to make these kind of changes ultimately.
You know, there's something to be said is once you've made the decision, just do it, right?
Yeah.
Just rip the Band-Aid off. And for whatever reason, it took them this long. And I said the same thing when the Grizzlies fired Taylor Jenkins, is if you just wake up in the morning and you are now 100% convinced that something has to change with that head coaching position, then you might as well just do it now, right? Like, there is not really a point, I suppose, in waiting. The curious part is why it took you this long and why do it at this point. But, you know, I think what's really interesting with what's going on in Denver, and the biggest difference between them and Memphis, is that this is a full spring cleaning, man. I mean, the GM is out, the head coach is out, and I think it's premature to start wondering about what this means for Nikola Jokic's future in Denver. I think there's a lot of things that have to happen between that's not exactly A to B. You know what I mean? That's more of like an A to X type of equation, and there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen in the middle of that to get to that point. But at the same time, there are people asking those questions. I know there's a ton of stuff that we want to get to in here, but yeah, it's so strange not knowing, without really understanding the dynamics of being in that organization and how toxic it really is. I mean, it could have just been as simple as you come to the conclusion that there is no way, with the toxicity spilling over from the relationship between Malone and Booth and Malone and perhaps even some of the players and what this defense has been, if you've decided, look, there's just no way that this team is winning a championship this year with the current structure in place, so we might as well just shake up the snow globe and see what happens. That might just be it, right? And then in that point, like maybe, Kroenke's statement of this is about 2025, maybe there is a little bit of truth to that.
I think that is there. I think you're right. And one of the things that was pointed out was that this is the tied for the latest coaching firing since 1981. It ties Hubie Brown being fired in 1981 by the Hawks. To make a change that late and it really be historically late in a season and later than Taylor Jenkins, who was also historically kind of an anomaly as far as a coach getting fired. Mm-hmm. That says something that is. They might not say that directly, but I think that's a fact you have to interpret in some way. That being a real part of this story, it's worth interpreting.
I think part of this is with the new CBA too. I just think there's so much pressure for these teams that are. I mean, Denver's not as expensive as they can be, but they're expensive, and there's so much pressure on these owners to see results right away under this new CBA because of how punitive it can be. I think that has to be at least a factor. It's probably not the number one factor, but it sounds like that's something that's going on here.
Yeah. I would also wonder if they think you stare at having Nikola Jokic in his prime still, and it's we can't waste any bit of this. And look, we don't know what Adam Lemmy is head coach, but is a guy who has, by all accounts, really good rapport with Jokic, been with the team since 2017. Has interviewed for other head coaching jobs before. I think Cleveland last year was one of them. If that's a guy you have there, and it's okay, we're just gonna break. It's kind of similar to the Grizzlies having just a guy in house that they liked and wanted to maybe get a look at as in this head coaching role. If you have that guy already on staff, maybe you just do it and you see if you catch something on fire. Maybe that's part of this too. It's just F it. Mm-hmm. What do we have to lose? We might lose them first round anyway. So let's just do this thing.
Timing that head coach firing, interim head coach bump at the right time.
Yeah. All right, so rest of the year. I am incredibly pessimistic, I think, about this Nuggets team now, Wes. If Murray is not healthy, if he's not right, if that hamstring is an issue, they're not making any kind of run in the West. They're not. We had them, I think, both in our second tier last time we did kind of tiers in the league. I don't have them there anymore. I don't think you can. Obviously, you have Jokic. You have a kind of some know-how with some of the guys that have been around and done that. But it's not the same team as 2023. You have a new coach in there. The Murray again thing is one of the biggest X factors, not the biggest going into the playoffs as far as health goes. I don't think there's really championship equity here to be found in this team. I think maybe they could still win a round. It wouldn't shock me. We'll see where they match up wise and how that looks. But I was getting increasingly pessimistic about how far this team could go this year. The further we got into the season, and that hasn't changed. This doesn't make me think there's a bump coming or anything until we maybe see it. But I don't think this is really a team that feels primed to make a real run in the West right now with how they're playing and how frankly a lot of other teams in the conference are playing.
Yeah, the Jokic part of it aside, there's two things that just don't work with the formula for them, and they don't take enough threes, right? They just don't take enough threes, and that's going to bite them in a 7-game series. And their defense isn't good enough, right? And so they are the most dominant paint scoring team in the league. Nikola Jokic very well might be the MVP, and he's certainly the best player in the league, but there's just too many things going against them. So I'm with you at this point where they could probably win a round, maybe 2 rounds. This team could make the Western Conference Finals. I just have a hard time thinking that they can make it past that and win a championship this year.
Right now, seed ends today, 4-5 against the Clippers. Are you picking?
Zubac Zubac can stand his ground against Jokic. Kawhi, if he's healthy, He's been playing great this year. I'm kind of in on the Clippers a little bit in terms of a playoff team that can make some noise. I'm not picking them to make the finals or anything, but yeah, man, that team could beat Denver for sure.
8-2 in their last 10. I'm gonna run through the non-Thunder teams in the conference. You tell me if you like the Nuggets more or less. We'll do some gut reactions on the other teams in the top 8 of the West. All due respect to the Kings and the Mavericks.
Yep, that's fine.
Don't care. Houston Rockets 2 seed.
I like him better.
Have an identity, tough as hell. By the way, Aben Thompson defending Steph Curry the other night. Incredible. I think he should. There's a really, really long look for first team all defense. Like he's
not just that
good. Defense player of the year.
Yep.
Yeah. He's gonna win one. Like Wemby is not just gonna win the next 15 of these probably. Amen Thompson.
He might get one when Wemby gets hurt again or something. But
yeah, him and Cooper Flag and Mobley and Chet are all like, and Jaren Jackson are all like guys that like are gonna be in like really good defensive talent at the top of the league. Yeah, Rockets have an identity. Offensive execution, I think, against Denver becomes less of an issue just because like Denver doesn't have the stoppers to maybe deal with some of the things Houston does. The Lakers, I'm taking the Lakers at this point.
Yep.
Luka and LeBron. It's pretty simple. Clippers, I would favor the Clippers in that series. If Kawhi's healthy in particular, Harden's playing really well. Zubac is, again, a really tough matchup for Jokic in that sense.
I might still go Nuggets in that one, but that to me screams 7-game series.
Yes. Warriors as the 6th seed right now.
I like Denver in that series. I just don't see I know that the Warriors beat them the other night. I just I don't think they have an answer for Jokic.
That's the one, if I were them and I got that out, that's the one I think I would feel the most confident in of the maybe Memphis will get there, but I think the Warriors of like the teams in the top 6 right now, that's the one that I would feel most confident in my ability to get through just because of Jokic in that first round. And the Lakers maybe too, they don't really have that perimeter presence, or interior presence, but we'll see.
Well, the difference between the Lakers at least have size across the board.
Yeah.
Right.
And
they're positionally big at every spot where Golden State is not.
No. Timberwolves. I mean, the Wolves just seem to have the Nuggets number.
Yeah. Minnesota wins that series. Yep.
Ant's gonna wreck that series like he did last year. Like the Wolves just have a really interesting dynamic there. All right, Grizzlies.
Denver. I picked Denver.
Yeah. So that's 2, maybe 3 teams of the top of the non-Thunder teams that you'd favor them against, which is not, I think, the standard that I think that's the thing when we look at this. If you just look at a big picture, when you have Jokic, that's not good enough. I think that's like it's a very simple statement, but I think that's just true. And I think that's the standard Denver seems to be holding itself to in doing this. Like that's like maybe the most basic read, but that feels like the read.
It's the read. It would have been nice if they held that standard the last couple off seasons, right? And if I'm a Nuggets fan, that's the thing I'm most upset with. It's now all of a sudden we have urgency. Now all of a sudden we've run out of patience. Where this entire time we've been talking about developing young players and winning a few over a 10-year period and all this stuff. It's now all of a sudden we're impatient on this stuff. If I'm a Nuggets fan, that's the main thing that I'm upset about is like I thought we had a plan. We could have disagreed with the plan, but I thought we at least had a plan now. And now all this stuff is going up in smoke. Now, that said, there's a lot of Nuggets fans who are really happy about firing Michael Malone. I think there's a lot of Nuggets fans that were unhappy about the coaching job there, but you pull most fans across the league of any fan base, of any team, and there is a loud minority or a majority that is upset with their head coach anyway.
The coach is the most unpopular person to every team's Twitter fan base, I think.
Yeah, Chris, I've covered the Warriors and I've covered the Heat, and I would hear every single day covering those teams and still do. Fire Steve Kerr, fire Eric Spoelstra. It's insane.
It was the thing with Ty Lue when he was with LeBron. It was like very clear that he knew what he was doing, and people were like, that's the problem, not the right guy. Like, I think it's the easiest thing. It's the easiest thing in basketball if you're a fan. I think to quarterback from home, right? Like I think the coach think, I don't like his rotate. Like without even labeling it, it's just like the easiest thing to just pick at because
it is
the coach
because it's also the thing we know the least about. Right?
Yes.
With a player, if the shot goes in or not, in the grand scheme of things. With a coach, it's like, oh, you should have called a timeout there. Why didn't you call a timeout when that other team went on a run? Or why aren't you playing this guy in the fourth quarter where we see so little of what these coaches do that you're right. The Monday morning quarterbacking on this stuff is insane. But that we're going to get into a meta conversation about that. But
no, but it's why I think probably there's a lot of Nuggets and they haven't like gone through like Nuggets or NBA Ready yet and like seen like just kind of ingested a bunch of takes from fans or like listening to like Adam Maras or someone talk about it. But I'm sure like there are a bunch of Nuggets fans who are like, hell yeah, like David Adelman should have been the coach the whole time, you know. Like I'm sure there are like that's just the reality of this. Okay, this is I think the biggest question we're gonna ask today, Wes. When you're looking at the iteration of what's to come here, I mean, you have Kevin O'Connor out here tweeting about how like they barely spoke and like never liked each other. Like if you're going from whatever this was to something new, what are you looking for? Like if you're trying to actually rebuild this, your front office, your structure of your basketball side of your operation, with Jokic in mind, with your limitations, I think flexibility wise in mind, what are you trying to build here to actually turn the page on this and find something better? If you've made the decision to do this.
Well, I'm trying to build a championship team.
Okay, that's the obvious answer. But like, give me like my first call is I'm calling Bob Myers.
Right. So let's back up real quick though. Yeah. So they go from Tim Connolly to Calvin Booth. Under Tim Connolly, there were no issues, at least reported or even talked about in league circles between Tim Connolly and the rest of the organization. Tim Connolly, Michael Malone. You didn't hear about this toxicity within the front office and within the leadership circles within Denver. You didn't hear about any of this stuff. Tim Connolly is very much a people person. He's a good GM, and he's a gutsy GM based on all the trades that you've seen him make, even just in Minnesota. But he is a people person. Mm-hmm. Calvin Booth never really struck anybody as a people person as much as Tim Connolly was. So if you're looking to repeat the success that you've had, then I think you're looking for a people person, which is the obvious name that you already mentioned. It's Bob Myers. Bob Myers has to be the first call. He is a people person among people person. People.
Let's say that 5 times fast. I can't do it.
That's the first call. If he takes a job, great. I don't know that there's much conversation there. I don't know what Bob Myers wants to do. He lives in Los Angeles. Does he want to move to Denver? It's close enough.
Don't know Bob Myers.
Want to take another? Is he ready to take another another GM job because he stepped away from Golden State because of just the rigors of that job and he just felt like he couldn't bring it every single day?
Yeah.
There's a lot of question marks, but that's the first call.
That's the kind of guy that I think I want for this from them. You can't do a new GM for this. This is not the kind of thing where like, hey, like Mike Gansey, for instance, is a guy who's interviewed for other jobs. He's with the Cavs now. He's worked his way up the Cavs organization over time. I think he's really well thought of. That kind of guy could be tempting. I don't want the guy right now that has to like do this for the first time. Like I kind of want the guy that's had the hand and knows how to manage it. Now, like the Bob Myers part of it, I don't think his time in Golden State ended like perfectly, but with the KD thing at least, but had really human relationship with all the guys that came up through there with Kerr. I know the Dunleavy era, I think the reporting indicated there was like a different tenor in some of that. All it seems to have kind of worked out there. I want a guy like Bob Myers. The Masai worked there before as well. Mm-hmm. That luster is kind of worn off, I think, a little bit on what he's done with the Raptors. Tim Conley's a free agent. Maybe there's a reunion there if he doesn't stay in Minnesota with no ownership in Minnesota. Do you call like Daryl Morey or something like that? Like I don't know what you do.
I thought we decided to go with a people person.
Yeah, it's true.
No, Tim Connolly's the other name. That's worth hanging out on for a little bit because you mentioned the fact that his future in Minnesota is a little up in the air. You have new ownership there. I think ownership will probably want to keep Tim Connolly because he's very popular in Minnesota. Again, he's a people person. These guys tend to be popular where they're at. But if I can't get Bob Myers, I don't know. Tim Connolly also might be my first call. If I'm Josh Kroenke and I say, look, man, we kind of screwed up not paying you when we did. That's our bad. Would you want to be reunited with Nikola Jokic or whatever? And maybe Connolly says, yeah, I can right the ship again. I don't know. It's those would be the top 2 calls. But you're right. You need. I think you do want somebody who's experienced, who has relationships across the league, and not somebody that only gets along with coaches and players, but somebody who gets along with other general managers. Because this roster needs fixing, and if Kroenke isn't going, if Denver's ownership group isn't going to be paying more, if they're not willing to increase payroll in a significant amount, then it's going to take somebody getting a little bit more creative. And so you've got to look at that too, where, Masai Ujiri is a little creative. Maybe that is something that you look at. Do you look? I don't know. You could look at any number of places, but I think you want somebody who has strong relationships across the league, but also has some creativity in terms of building out a bench and has a good eye for talent. Because that's the other thing with Calvin Booth. I don't know that you feel awesome about anybody outside of Christian Brown that this guy drafted. So I think you're also looking for somebody with a really strong draft record and player development record.
I mean, even guys that we theoretically like, Pickett, Peyton Watson are the two that come to mind. It's not like those guys are like it hasn't been undeniable that they need to play a ton, right? It's not like Mike Malone was denying like guys that were clearly really good, or like it was like maybe he needed to trust them more. I think that's a very fair argument and probably one I agree with. But it's not like these guys were like coming out and blowing the doors off every minute they played and like demanded to be in the rotation. We're still getting shunned that's a different question.
Right. I mean, these guys are fine to be 11th, 12th, 13th in your rotation. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be 7th, 8th, 9th in your rotation right now. Yeah. And they're still dealing with the same stuff, right? Like if they're not going to be willing to spend on free agents and vets and stuff like that, then they're going to have to develop these guys and they're going to have to draft better. And so you're going to need a coach who's not only ready to win right now, but also good at the player development stuff. You're going to need a GM who's not only willing to figure out things that can help them win right now, but also draft well and find guys who can contribute. So they're still sort of dealing with these two timelines for no reason, unless they start investing in this team a little bit more or get a GM who is creative enough to figure out a way to kind of pull the plug on some of this the young guy stuff and just really go full tilt with the veterans. I don't know, but we were talking about Bob Myers, and if you want a guy who's drafting well, that's not Bob Myers. I think there's a lot of strengths that Bob Myers had in Golden State. The draft wasn't one of them, right? Tim Connolly's draft record is spotty. So I think that's a really interesting question, Chris, is like, what are they looking for out of this general manager? Is it somebody who can restock the bench with vets, or were the Kroenkes happy with at least Calvin Booth's decision to go with the draft and build to the draft? Because I can only imagine a GM would probably want to go with vets and proven talent. Mm-hmm. They're only going with the draft because they're kind of handcuffed here. Yeah. So maybe they are looking for somebody who can kind of nail the draft in a way that Booth didn't.
And I think the draft in the CBA environment has never been more important in some ways. Like I think
that's fair.
It's a really vital thing, just managing the cap. Like I think you are going to see more and more teams trying to play younger guys just to control cost at certain points. I think.
So are you looking at then the Thunder's head scout? Are you looking at teams that typically draft well? Are you looking at those and saying that's the guy I want?
This is what I would say. This is the structure I would pitch to you to create like a really good organizational kind of feel to it. I want my head executive who is like can be the CEO of this, right? Like who can manage the relationships, who has the relationships, mm-hmm. who can set up who has done this before, knows what it takes to win at the highest level. Maybe can coax more out of ownership. Frankly, I think that's have a guy maybe Bob Myers could be the guy that could get the Kroenkes just to be a little bit more aggressive and something. Maybe not. Maybe that's not possible. But I want that CEO type. And like he becomes like you give him the title of president of basketball operations. Then I don't know who this person is. I don't if it's someone from the Heat, if it's someone from the Thunder. Pick a team that has drafted really well the last couple of years and like hire their like a guy who's really high up in that organization to be your GM. Give them that promotion, mm-hmm. and then they get to get the general manager experience. They get to oversee scouting while the president of basketball operations is the big picture thinker.
Yep,
do that. You then also need to make sure your coach is in alignment with whatever you're doing. That head coach, if it's David Adelman, if it's somebody else, I don't know. That picking names for a coach right now feels way too early for me. But I think the head coaching hire needs to be in line with whatever you've decided from the top down. That head coaching hire has to be in line with what you're doing, and because you need to have it. So let's just say it's Bob Myers, ex guy from the Thunder, and it's David Adelman becomes a head coach. All of them, if they're in line, and together and working in the same direction, I think it's more productive. And then it's easier to sell to Nikola Jokic and the rest of that locker room that this is the way we're going to try to be a title contender next year.
Yeah, what you just described, I think, is what every organization wants. It's and I think that's what they envisioned when Calvin Booth was there and Michael Malone was there, and then personalities get involved. And the thing is, this is such a highly competitive industry.
Yes.
And the moment stuff starts going wrong, fingers start getting pointed because people don't want to lose their jobs. So you got to hire the right people. And I thought Michael Malone was the right person. I can't sign off on very much of what Calvin Booth decided to do as general manager. I hate to just keep blaming him. Obviously, Michael Malone could have managed up a little bit better than he did. And he does have a reputation for being prickly, and that probably wasn't the best thing for him to be doing at that moment, but it cost him his job. So, yeah, I think the one thing I can feel, we talk about experience in terms of the general manager. I think they're going to go with an experienced head coach. I would be a little bit surprised if Adelman kept this job. Yeah. I think they're going to go with a guy who, or they're going to go with somebody who has previous head coaching experience. That tends to be what the Kroenkes have done. Like I said, they did it with Malone. They've done it with other guys before him. There's a bunch of names that have already been out there. Taylor Jenkins could be out there. I think there's somebody like Micah Nori in Minnesota who has experience working with Nikola Jokic and was an assistant coach under Michael Malone for a little bit. Doesn't really have head coach experience, but he stepped in with Chris Finch for Chris Finch last year when Finch got hurt. I think he's a name that is worth monitoring for this. Would it shock you if he called Jeff Van Gundy?
Oh my God. Oh.
I mean, look at what Van Gundy was tasked with improving the Clippers defense, and they went from 16th in defensive rating last year to 2nd. And he's obviously got head coaching experience. I think these are some of the names that you're looking at. But then what happens when you take a head coach with experience and maybe somebody who's accomplished is those head coaches have respect for certain people, certain general managers, and they usually have a way of doing things that they feel comfortable with.
I think there's also the Jokic part of this to consider as well. It's like what Nikola Jokic, we don't really know what he thinks about, kind of really anything besides his horses.
Well, he wants to win.
Yeah, it's we know that he wants to win.
That's really clear.
What is his philosophy? Is about what to do here is a really open question. Does he value the Adelman? If he's like, hey, Adelman's been my guy, I trust him. Let's go with that. Does he want?
Well, I think most players like the devil. I think most players are until a star player is at the point where they want the coach fired. And by the way, there is nothing suggesting that Jokic wanted Malone fired here, but
no,
players tend to like the familiar.
The Jeff Van Gundy thing has really hit me, Wes. It was good.
No reporting behind that.
Wouldn't shock, but that he's wanted a head coaching job for a while. It's always been Houston was the reporter.
Yeah, if you look at and again you look at what went wrong, and the thing that in that athletic report that you were talking about, they twice mentioned the fact that the defense was in the bottom 10 of the league. They are going to need to improve that defense. Nikola Jokic is upset about how bad they are defensively. So who's the guy defensively? You mentioned Mike Brown. That's another name that's out there. I think that makes a lot of sense. Somebody maybe with a little bit more of defensive. Michael Malone was a good defensive coach, but still, maybe the voice just got stale at some point. He lost the locker room, whatever it is that you want to believe. But I think they're going to probably look in a direction where defense is a specialty. And that's why I named the names. Mike Nori with Minnesota has done a lot with that defense. Jeff Van Gundy with the Clippers. There's a lot of different names that you could look at.
The last thing is the roster.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the most important thing. I immediately just jumped to thinking this feels like the summer. Maybe this is a Michael Porter Jr. trade. Maybe there's an Aaron Gordon trade. I can't imagine Murray has a ton of positive trade value right now, based on the injuries, based on the concern I think about his health going forward. You're obviously not trading Jokic. You don't have a ton of other stuff that I think people will be really excited about getting. You have apron considerations to do. Mm-hmm. You're probably historically, based on what we know, limited by what ownership is willing to spend. So it makes me think, okay, picks and MPJ or Gordon, and I think I would prefer to trade MPJ of those two. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I
It's
think
tough, right? Because I mean, Aaron Gordon is dealing with the ankle injury all year, and so, but Michael Porter Jr. feels like he's taken a little bit of a step back this season.
I trust Gordon like
I do
implicitly
too.
more than I do MPJ.
And he feels more of like a playoff player and a kind of guy that you need at
Yeah.
when the stakes are at their highest. But Michael Porter Jr. is really important to this team. He is the only elite 3-point shooter on the roster who is playable for big minutes. So but Michael Porter Jr. also said this to Ramona Shelburne before the season. Like, this story was already out there. This is the craziest thing, where it felt like there was toxicity and something brewing here. And Michael Porter Jr. said it before the season. He said, if we don't accomplish what we want to accomplish, we know that things are going to be different next season. So, to answer your question, Chris, I think all of it. I think all of it's on the table. I think if this team does what we were talking about earlier and they lose in the first round or something like that, I think you shop everybody outside of Jokic, right? Like, doesn't it feel like everybody would be on the table at that point? Now, could they trade those guys? What's Jamal Murray's value? These are all fair questions. But if you lose in the first round, depending on who you hire as GM, it feels like they would just start making calls on all these guys and seeing what they can get.
I feel like this is also a team that there's someone that's going to be concocting trade scenarios to get Kevin Durant on this team. Would also just be like a hunch.
I mean, this is going to be a crazy offseason. I was putting a list together of guys who could get traded.
It's a lot of fucking guys. It's a lot of fucking guys that could get traded this summer.
I have 21 names just off the dome that
Rip
are really interesting.
Rip them.
Right now, I got
give me just like if you don't want to do all 20, just give me some of them that are Durant being an obvious one to start with.
Larry Markkinen, Anthony Simons, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Trae Young, Jaren Jackson Jr. up for an extension. I think that's something with all the uncertainty in Memphis. Damian Lillard, like, what's going on in Milwaukee? You could go even bigger in Milwaukee if you want to make those kinds of phone calls. Kevin Durant in Phoenix. Do you want to go even bigger in Phoenix if you start making those calls? There's so many guys. And, I think you still have Jokic. And it's clear that this team needs to solve two issues. They need to get better defensively. And what works around Jokic is length. And that's what worked. But you're not going to be a top 10 defense probably, but you could be top 12, top 13, which is what they were when they won the championship 2 years ago. So you can get that. You need length behind Jokic if you're going to have him play up at the level and hedge on those ball screens, then you need guys that can kind of get behind him and make up and recover in that space that you're going to have behind him. So if that's the goal, if that's how you're going to play defensively going forward, which tends to be how Jokic wants to play defense, then you still need to have length, which Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. have. But if you're going to swap some of these guys out, whatever you swap them out for, they all have to be long. So you need that defensively, but you also need to figure out a way to get closer to league average also in terms of just three-point shooting rate and three-point shooting percentage, which they are so far from at this point. But that just and you got to fix the bench. So those are all the things that you got to do. And maybe it's as simple as, can we swap out Michael Porter Jr. for somebody who also shoots a lot of threes, makes a lot of threes, and maybe gets us one other piece that comes off the bench, and we sign a couple of vets, and maybe we're right back into this thing next year. I don't know. It sounds easier said than done, but I don't think it's as easy as just hire a new coach and we're right back rocking and rolling where we were a couple of years ago.
Last thing I'll ask you, Wes, we can end here, and my answer to this would be yes, but I think it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. Can this team go from where it is now to being like you feel they're in the upper tier in your preseason projections for next year? Is that a doable thing for them to do this summer based on what we know? I think it's possible, but I think it's a hard thing to pull off based on what we know about how they operate.
And what we know about the Thunder, right? It doesn't feel like they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's
you
like
look at some of the other teams that can make some moves.
Yeah.
Like, does Houston add one piece, and now we're talking about them in the same class as Oklahoma City. But yes, I think it is definitely possible for them to get to that point next year because they have Nikola Jokic. And as long as they have Jokic, they'll have enough of an infrastructure in place. It's just a matter of sort of plugging those holes that we were just talking about.
when we get around to doing Wes a ranking of entering off-season teams, it might be my number one now.
That's a great point.
I don't know. The Suns are like the easy answer for one, because they're the Suns and they have a lot. They like have to do work and they're like signaling to the world that they have a lot of work to do. But kind of think Denver just because of Jokic might be one now.
There's a lot on the line, man. I mean, I'm glad they're doing something at least because it does feel like we were just sort of spinning our wheels and wasting this guy's prime with a team that wasn't good enough. And just I hope for the NBA's sake and for Jokic's sake that they fix what they need to fix and that these end up being the right decisions, even if we disagree with firing Mike Malone now. Like, you just hope that they're the right decisions because you just want to see this guy playing in the biggest moments.
All right, we're on there. That's it all in the Denver Nuggets. More to come. Back later this week with more Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. Enjoy the hoops. We'll talk to you soon.